Hey everyone, we are working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Oh, you felt that? You felt that? Because I did. I felt that all the way down to my soul, baby. That right there, that little calm, calculated, loaded response from a Cleveland Browns defensive lineman just blew up the entire narrative that the media has been pushing for the last 2 weeks. And if you weren't paying attention, if you were sleeping on this story, then you better pull up a chair right now, because Dre Fiver from Dre Reports is about to break this whole thing down for you. No filter, no corporate spin, just the real. Welcome in. If you're new here, this is where we come when the sports world is on fire and everybody else is busy throwing gasoline instead of telling you the truth. Hit that subscribe button right now. Smash that like button and buckle up. Because the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation just got a whole lot more interesting, and the man who just changed the entire conversation is not the head coach, not the general manager, not even one of the quarterbacks themselves. It's a defensive tackle. His name is Maliek Collins, and what he said on Teron Armstead's podcast, The Set, on May 1st, is still echoing across every single NFL message board, comment section, and sports radio phone line in America. Let me set the scene for you, because context is everything. The Cleveland Browns enter the 2026 season with what might be the most chaotic, drama-soaked soap opera quarterback room in all of professional football. And that is saying something, because this is a league where we've seen grown men cry over depth charts. You've got Deshaun Watson, the man with the fully guaranteed $230 million contract, the man who has not played a meaningful snap of NFL football since October of 2024, when he tore his Achilles tendon, and who then, because apparently lightning can absolutely strike twice in the worst possible way, tore it again in January of 2025, wiping out his entire second comeback before it ever started. You got Shedeur Sanders, the son of primetime himself, Deion Sanders, who came in as a fifth-round pick in the 2025 draft and actually gave Cleveland fans something they haven't had in years, a reason to watch the offense in the fourth quarter. You've got Dillon Gabriel, the third-round pick from last year who started 6 games. And now you've got rookie Talon Green, the freakishly athletic 6th-round selection from the 2026 draft, who reportedly ran a jaw-dropping 40 and jumped out of the gym at the combine. 4 quarterbacks, 1 job, and an entire city of Cleveland fans holding their collective breath. Now, if you've been following this storyline, you know that roughly 2 weeks ago, veteran Cleveland.com reporter Mary Kay Cabot dropped a report that sent Browns fans spiraling into full-on crisis mode. According to Cabot's reporting, Deshaun Watson emerged from the team's voluntary, unpadded veteran minicamp, a minicamp where nobody is hitting anybody, nobody is wearing pads, and the whole thing more closely resembles a backyard toss than an actual NFL evaluation, with, quote, an edge over Shedeur Sanders. She reported Watson had the inside track to be named QB1, and just like that, social media exploded. Browns fans were furious. Shedeur fans were furious, and the entire football world started whispering about whether Cleveland's ownership group was putting its thumb on the scale to protect its monstrous investment in a quarterback who, let's be completely honest here, has given them almost nothing in return for years. Now look, and this is Dre's personal opinion, so you already know I'm going in. I'm sorry, but I have to say what needs to be said. This is a man who hasn't played in nearly 2 years. 2 years. He tore his Achilles once. Then he tore it again. And we're supposed to be impressed because he threw some crisp passes in shorts at a voluntary minicamp that the starters didn't even all bother to show up to? Come on, man. Come on. The bar is underground. The bar has left the building. The bar is somewhere in the Earth's mantle at this point. As reported by NBC Sports Pro Football Talk, Watson got the lion's share of first-team reps in those practices, while Sanders received some first-team work, but far less. And that, somehow, was being framed as evidence of a competition, as if experience and contract size getting a guy more reps before the pads even go on is somehow a shocking revelation. That's not competition, that's choreography. But here is where it gets really interesting, and here's where Malik Collins walks into the room and quietly flips the table. On May 1st, 2026, Collins appeared on 5-time Pro Bowl offensive tackle Teron Armstead's podcast, The Set. Now, Teron Armstead, for those who don't know, spent the majority of his career in New Orleans before finishing up with the Miami Dolphins, and he's built one of the better NFL player-hosted podcast platforms out here since hanging up his cleats. Real talk, no teleprompter, genuine football conversations, the kind of show where guys actually say things. And Malik Collins? He said things. When asked about the quarterback competition, Collins played it cool at first. He said he didn't really have any thoughts. But then, and this is the part where you need to lean in, he started talking, and what came out of his mouth was far more revealing than any carefully worded press release or any unnamed source whispering to a beat reporter. As reported by multiple outlets including Yardbarker and Heavy, Collins said, and I'm quoting here, "I think Shedeur, I like the swag he brings, the confidence he plays with. Deshaun's a little bit more quiet, but he is still a baller. And then the kicker, I think they said it is an open competition. Let the best man win in that situation." Let me translate that for you. A defensive lineman, a guy who goes to practice every day, who watches these quarterbacks from 50 yards away, who reads the energy in the building, who knows exactly what the locker room temperature is, just told the world that this competition is real. It is open, and the guys inside that building are not operating under the assumption that Watson has already won anything. That is enormous. That is not a sideline reporter speculating. That is not an anonymous source with an agenda. That is a man on the inside looking directly at the camera and saying, "Don't believe the hype." And look, Collins was careful. He's a professional. He didn't say Shedeur is definitely going to win. He didn't throw Watson under the bus. He's too smart for that. He acknowledged Watson's pedigree, noted that he played with Watson back in Houston, and saw the kind of dynamic player he was in his prime. But here's the thing about what Collins said regarding Watson. He said Watson has a lot to prove. Not a little. A lot. And that's being said by a man who actually shared a locker room with Deshaun Watson at the Houston Texans before Watson got traded to Cleveland. This isn't someone speculating from the outside. This is someone who has watched this man play football up close, who respects him, and is still acknowledging that he has significant ground to cover. That tells you everything. Now, the bigger story underneath all of this is what Collins' comments reveal about the locker room dynamics. Because here's something that has been largely glossed over in the mainstream coverage. The veterans on this team were told this would be an open competition. Todd Monken came in and made that promise. And what Collins is essentially signaling with his remarks is that the players are holding the coaching staff to that promise. If Monken came out tomorrow and said Watson's the guy, competition over, and the veterans in that locker room had been operating under the belief that this was genuinely open, you've got a problem. Not just a press conference problem. A culture problem. The kind of crack in the foundation that has doomed coaching tenures in Cleveland before, and could doom this one too, if it's not handled correctly. As Zach Jackson of The Athletic has noted in reporting on this situation, the credibility of the evaluation process matters enormously. If the players don't believe the decision is truly performance-based, you risk losing the room before a single regular season snap is played. And for Todd Monken, who is brand new to this organization and trying to establish himself as a legitimate authority figure, having his tough talk revealed as just that, talk, would be catastrophic. And speaking of the decision, here's where Dre's personal opinion comes in again, and I'm sorry, not sorry. Deshaun Watson earning $46 million from the Cleveland Browns this season whether he plays or sits. $46 million. The largest cap number in the entire NFL was this man's number before they restructured the contract in March to free up cap space. This is the context in which you have to evaluate every single decision the Browns make at the quarterback position. Is every rep Watson gets in OTAs a pure football decision? Or is it a financial decision disguised as a football decision? Is ownership, the same ownership group whose fingerprints fans have long worried about being in places they have no business being, putting pressure on the coaching staff to justify their historic mistake of a contract by running it back one more time with a quarterback who has played a combined 12 games in the last 3 years? I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm saying you have to ask the question. You have to, because the money is too big to pretend it doesn't exist. Now, here's the flip side. Here's where I'll give Watson his due, because fairness matters. As reported by CBS Sports, Watson's experience with offensive systems similar to what Todd Monken runs is genuinely relevant in the early stages of an offseason install. A veteran quarterback helps the young skill players, and there are a lot of young skill players on this team, get aligned correctly. He helps avoid pre-snap penalties. He moves through progressions in a way that a second-year quarterback still learning to read NFL defenses might not. There is a legitimate football argument for giving Watson early reps. The problem is when that practical reality gets packaged and sold to the public as evidence that the competition is already over in late April. That's where the narrative goes off the rails. And that's exactly what Collins was quietly correcting when he sat down with Armstead and said what he said. Let's also talk about Shedeur Sanders for a moment, because this young man deserves more than to be treated as a supporting character in Deshaun Watson's redemption arc. Sanders came into the league as a fifth-round pick, and if you remember the draft coverage, that slide was one of the most discussed storylines of the 2025 NFL Draft. Teams passed on him repeatedly. Questions about his decision-making, his tendency to hold the ball too long, chasing the spectacular play rather than taking the available gain, his over-reliance on individual talent rather than playing within a system. These were the knocks. And then he got to Cleveland, and in the games he actually played, something shifted. As noted by Yardbarker and other outlets that covered the 2025 season closely, the offense simply felt different with Sanders on the field. There was a belief, there was an energy, and, as Collins himself acknowledged, Shedeur brought a confidence and swagger to that huddle that made his teammates feel like they could win. You cannot manufacture that. You either have it or you don't. Now, the question that is legitimately on the table heading into training camp is exactly what Tyvis Powell addressed on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show this week. Is Shedeur Sanders capable of being a top 2-0 quarterback in the NFL in 2026? And I want to sit with that question seriously for a second, because the answer is not as simple as yes or no. The honest answer is, it depends on an enormous number of variables that are all currently in motion at the same time. Start with the offensive line. As has been widely reported, the Cleveland Browns have spent heavily, reportedly around $100 million when you account for all the moves, to rebuild their offensive line this offseason. They used the 6th overall pick in the 2026 draft on Spencer Fano at left tackle. They brought in veteran free agents. The talent infusion up front is real. For a quarterback like Shedeur, whose biggest critique is that he holds the ball too long and tries to manufacture plays that don't need to be manufactured, having more time in the pocket is transformative. When you're scrambling because the pocket collapses in 1.8 seconds, you're forced into hero mode. When you've got 3 seconds of clean air, you can execute the mundane, move the chains, and look like a franchise quarterback. The infrastructure is finally there to give Shedeur a fair test. Then there are the weapons: KC Concepcion, Denzel Boston, Jerry Jeudy if he can rediscover whatever it was that made him a first-round pick. The receiving room, while still unproven, has more talent attached to it than anything Sanders played with as a rookie. And Tyvis Powell made the point that resonates with me personally. Shedeur Sanders is the kind of quarterback who trusts his receivers, maybe too much, because he plays with the belief that everyone around him is as talented as he thinks they are. With better receivers, that confidence becomes an asset instead of a liability. He stops waiting for guys to win contested 50-50 balls they can't win, and starts throwing to guys who can actually make those plays. The coaching staff matters too. Todd Monken is an offensive mind. He's worked with quarterbacks of all different profiles and made them functional, productive, schematically intelligent signal callers. Monken was genuinely excited about working with Shedeur when he took this job. That is on the record. And if Monken is allowed to actually coach this competition without ownership interference, without the weight of a $46 million contract distorting his football judgment, then Shedeur Sanders has every right to walk into training camp and take that starting job. But here's the part of this conversation that I don't think gets enough attention: the locker room. Let's go back to Maliek Collins, because when a defensive lineman, a guy whose job literally has nothing to do with who starts at quarterback, takes the time to publicly remind the world that this competition is real and open, he is doing that for a reason. He is doing that because the players on this team have a stake in this outcome too. They're the ones who have to go out and execute on Sunday. They're the ones who have to run routes, catch passes, block for whoever is under center. And in Collins' comments, there is a clear signal. The locker room is not ready to simply hand this thing to Deshaun Watson based on reputation and salary. The locker room wants to see it won the right way. And honestly, that's exactly how it should be. That's what Todd Monken promised. That's what you owe these players who showed up, put in the work, and are trying to build something. You owe them the truth that the best quarterback will play. And if Deshaun Watson is genuinely the best quarterback on this roster when training camp ends, then so be it. Start him. But if Shedeur Sanders goes out there and outplays him, if he takes the layups when the layups are there, makes the tight window throws when they need to be made, commands the huddle and gives this offense life, then you start Shedeur. Full stop. No exceptions for contract size. No exceptions for ownership's emotional investment in proving a mistake wasn't a mistake. Because here's the thing that gets lost in all of this narrative chaos, and this is Dre's real talk moment for the day. The Cleveland Browns have been bad for a long time. Really bad. And every time they've gotten close to something real, something that could actually build, they've found a way to make the wrong decision for the wrong reasons at the quarterback position. The wrong decision didn't always look like the wrong decision in the moment. That's the thing about organizational dysfunction. It usually comes dressed up in reasonable-sounding logic. Watson has more experience. Watson knows the system better. Watson gives us the best chance to win now. These are the kinds of statements that sound sensible right up until the moment the season falls apart in October, and you're sitting at 3 wins and 4 losses. wondering how you got. Here again, the entire point of Todd Monken's arrival in Cleveland, the entire reason this hire generated as much excitement as it did, is that he was supposed to be different. An offensive mind who would evaluate players honestly, install a modern system, and develop Shedeur Sanders into the kind of quarterback that could anchor a franchise for the next decade. That is the vision. That is what Browns fans signed up for when Monken got the job. Maliek Collins, sitting across from Teron Armstead on a podcast couch, just reminded everybody that the players inside that building are still holding on to that vision too. And that matters. Now, I want to address something directly, because I've been getting this question in the comments and in my DMs, and it needs to be answered. People are asking, what happens to Shedeur if Watson opens the season as the starter? And look, this is a legitimate question, and I'm going to give you a real answer instead of a hot take. If Watson wins this job in a genuine, fair, performance-based competition, then Shedeur Sanders needs to do exactly what Tyvis Powell said. He needs to learn, absorb, grow, and be ready when his number is called. Because history in Cleveland tells us that no quarterback stays healthy for 17 games. History in Cleveland tells us that circumstances change. History in Cleveland tells us quite clearly that Shedeur Sanders will play games this season regardless of who starts Week 1. The question is whether he'll be ready to seize the moment when it arrives. But if Watson gets handed the job for the wrong reasons, if this is a situation where the coaching staff is pressured to protect a legacy and a contract rather than make the best football decision, that is where it gets dangerous. Because Shedeur Sanders is not a guy who is going to quietly accept a backup role he doesn't think he deserves. He's the son of Deion Sanders. He comes from a football bloodline that is drenched in confidence and competition. And if he feels like the process wasn't real, if he feels like the deck was stacked, the energy inside that locker room will not be good. Not for him, not for Watson, and not for Todd Monken, who will have spent his first months as a head coach burning the very credibility he was hired to build. The good news, and I'm going to end this section on the good news, is that Maliek Collins' comments suggest the locker room is still in a healthy place. The players are still operating under the belief that this is real, that the best man will start, that Todd Monken meant what he said. Collins is a veteran, a savvy, experienced defensive lineman who has played for multiple teams and seen how organizations operate when things go wrong. If he sensed that the fix was in, if he sensed that this was already decided and the competition was a show, he wouldn't have gone on Teron Armstead's podcast and said what he said. The fact that he did, the fact that he showed up, said Shedeur is talented, said the competition is open, said let the best man win, tells me the locker room is still intact, and that gives Shedeur Sanders everything he needs. So here's where we stand right now, people. You've got a voluntary minicamp narrative pushed by Mary Kay Cabot that Watson has the edge. You've got Todd Monken walking that narrative back within 24 hours, saying publicly he is not there yet on the decision and that he needs more time on the field before making any conclusions. You've got Maliek Collins going on national podcast airtime and quietly but powerfully reasserting that this competition is exactly what Monken said it would be. Open, fair, and decided by performance. You've got Shedeur Sanders coming into his second year with a real offensive line in front of him for the first time in his professional career, a new receiving core with genuine weapons, and an offensive-minded head coach who was apparently genuinely excited to work with him. And you've got training camp on the horizon in late July, where the pads come on, Myles Garrett starts flying off the edge, and the real evaluations begin. This story is not over. This story is barely getting started. And if you think one voluntary minicamp in April decided the starting quarterback job of the 2026 Cleveland Browns, then you have not been paying attention to how the city does things. Nothing in Cleveland is ever simple. Nothing is ever clean. But sometimes, the chaos produces something worth watching. And right now, with Shedeur Sanders healthy, hungry, and apparently beloved by his own defensive line, I'm telling you, watch this space.